present our first topic, wood identification, a tool for preservation of indigenous architecture of traditional houses in Ifugao, Philippines, is Professor Rosalie Mendoza. Okay, so she's a faculty at the Department of Food Science and Technology of the College of Forestry of the University of the Philippines, Los Baños. Professor Mendoza finished her PhD in forestry, major in wood science and technology from the University of the Philippines, Los Baños in 2019, as a recipient of the CHED Faculty Development Program Scholarship. Now, dear attendees, we will now play the video presentation of Professor Mendoza. Questions and comments regarding the presentation will be entertained after all presentations are delivered. So for the meantime, you may write your questions and comments at the Q&A box below. So dear attendees, please watch this video presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Rosalie Mendoza from the University of the Philippines, Los Baños. Welcome to our panel presentation about preserving the Ifugao traditional houses amidst woodlot and forest biodiversity. On behalf of my co-authors, Professor Pastor Malabrico Jr., Professor Eulalie Dulnuan, Dr. Marisa Bulong, and Dr. Consuelo D. El Habito, I will be presenting our paper about the wood species used by the Ifugaos in building their houses and how this study can help in preserving the indigenous architecture of the Ifugao traditional house. This is the outline of my presentation. I will be giving a short background about the study, the objective, the methods that we did, the results that we gathered, our conclusions, some acknowledgements, and the references that we used. This is the Ifugao rice terraces. It is listed among UNESCO's World Heritage Sites. The rice terraces were carved out by the Ifugao, a group of culturally rich people who have lived in this area for hundreds of years. It is definitely part of who they are and how they live. And this is an example of an Ifugao traditional house, an integral part of the humble yet undeniably grand landscape. And this house adds to the charm of the rice terraces. These are the parts of the traditional house which will be discussed by one of my co-authors later. These are the foundation parts, the floor frame and floor parts, wall frames and wall boards, and the roof frames and roof parts. What you are seeing now is a sad reality in relation to the Ifugao traditional house. There are concerns that the loss of traditional architecture could erode the preservation of the Ifugao cultural heritage. The passage of time and modern influences have seen a decline in the number and use of these traditional houses. Moreover, little is known about the wood species used in the construction of the traditional house. This kind of information can be very helpful if there will be efforts to preserve or restore the Ifugao traditional houses in the future. So how can wood identification serve as a tool to preserve this indigenous architecture? Through wood identification, we can generate knowledge about the species used in building these houses in support of new construction and restoration efforts. In addition, we can gather information about the historical and cultural value of the species used in constructing the houses, which later on can be used by the local communities in promoting environmental sustainability through the protection, propagation, or cultivation of these species. So this is the objective of the study, to identify the wood species used in the construction of Ifugao traditional houses built in certain periods. What we did, We randomly selected houses according to the period when the houses were built. This mapping study will be discussed also by my co-authors later in this panel presentation. So we had 4 groupings. These are some of the houses that we sampled for this study. We sampled standing houses as well as dismantled houses. To gather information about the wood species that were used in building the houses, we did triangulation. So we did the actual wood identification using the physical and structural features of the wood. We interviewed builders about their knowledge about the species that they use in building the houses. And we also interviewed homeowners whenever they are available, because some of the houses were abandoned. So we were not able to interview the homeowner of those abandoned houses. So these are two builders and homeowners that we interviewed for this study. So what we did is we also photo document the cross section, the transverse section of the wooden components of the house. So we used a USB microscope and a computer to capture the images. So it was easy for the dismantled part, but quite challenging for the standing houses. We also verified the identities of the species that we observe by using wood identification database, handbooks, xylarium specimens, and actual leaf and wood samples that we collected during our field surveys. This study sought to identify different wood species from a number of traditional houses in Ifugao, in Kiangan, Ifugao specifically. So we identified 32 species, mostly are indigenous and endemic. The choice of wood species and their use reflected the indigenous knowledge on house construction of the builders, functionality, the physical attributes, and availability of the species or the properties of the wood species, the technical properties of the wood species. The indigenous knowledge of the Ifugao builders on certain woods appeared to be appropriate. Premium species were generally preferred, but their dwindling scarcity have influenced a shift to the use of lesser known wood species and exotic species. These are the species that we identified for this study. So we identified Analdong, Tabangawon. What you are seeing now are the cross-section images of the wood and the images of the leaves, fruits, flowers that we collected during our field surveys. Analdong, Tabangawon, Banutan species also, Pole, Fuchuan, Gutmo, Udjo, Palayon, Aliguyon, Gemelina, Amugawon, Kawahi, Bakan, Bini, Dulawon, Bakuwog, Mahogany, Tobak, Latbang, Ludping, Galiwgiwon, Bultik, Bahag, Tuwol, Halong, Dumliing, Tikom, Analtap, Dalakan babae, Dalakan lalaki. We observed that for the foundation parts, specifically for posts, the builders used species belonging to moderately high to high strength grouping. We observed Cerebrus glaber or Galiwgiwon, Shorea stylosa, Banutan, Shorea species, and Amugawon to be generally used for the post structure of the traditional house. Of importance is the Strebulus glaber, which we only observe as being used for post, and it was not used for the other parts of the house, unlike these other species. For the rat, for the anti-rat dish, we observe these species, and they are generally belonging to the medium to moderately high strength grouping. Specifically for Cryptocarya, tomentosa or kawahi, and Sandoricum vidali, they are just like Galugiwon, they were specifically used for under at this part of the house, unlike Udjo and Tikom, which were also used for the other parts of the house. Cryptocarya tomentosa and Sandoricum vidali are generally easy to carve species. For the house cage and the roof parts, we observe that the builders used low to species belonging to low to medium strength grouping like bini, dilawon, latbang, tuwol, and sampalakium species. We also observe that in recent periods, in the most recent period, 1990 to 2020, the builders used exotic species like Gimelina and mahogany or Swietenia macrophylla. In houses built in the earlier periods, we observe that the builders use amogawon, bahag, bultik in building the house cage and the roof parts of their traditional house, as well as the Sharia species. And these species belong to high to moderately high strength grouping of wood species. What you are seeing now is a table containing all the species that were identified, the period when the houses we sampled were built, where we observed these species as components of the house, the occurrence of these species, if the species is indigenous, endemic, or exotic, and the conservation status. So if you will look closely on this table, you will observe that some species were used only in the most recent period, like Trema orientalis or Analdong, and Shorea astelosa also, or Banutan, while and Gimelina, while there are species there are species that are consistently being used in building the houses like Itangan or Wenmania luzoniensis. Gutmo, Vaccinium commingianum. You will observe here that for Ujo or Pterocarpus indicus, it was used by the builders for the sampled houses. We observed that the builders used Ujo from the earliest period up to 1990, but for the houses built in 1991 to 2020, we did not observe the as part Nara or Ujo as part of the traditional house. Same with Amugawon or Vitex parviflora. So, for Galugiwon or Cerebrus clubber, we only observe it in the earlier period, but we did not observe or we did not see any posts made of Galugiwon in the recently built houses. This can be the this can be related, this table can be correlated with the conservation status of these houses. So if you will observe for the houses that were for the species that were used consistently, they are either not, their conservation status is not yet evaluated, or least concern. Uh, but for the species that were used only for the earlier period, like Vitex parviflora or Amogawon, their conservation status is already vulnerable or endangered for Udjo or Trocarpus indicus. So, for our conclusions, we observe that most species used in the construction are naturally growing in the Philippines, and the builders preferred generally the premium species to be used in building the houses. But there are concerns regarding the availability of these premium species. So some species were not observed to be utilized for construction during some period ranges, as what I have mentioned earlier. And it also became evident that the builders use appropriate species for different house parts in terms of the wood properties. So this study has identified that mostly native species have been used by the builders in Kiangan, Ifugao for the construction of the house, while some literature mentioned the specific wood species used in the house construction. When we did review of literature, the team believes that this project is a pioneering study to really dig deep, to go to the field and identify the wood species used in the construction of the houses. We consider this as the team's significant contribution that will be inculcated in the scientific documentation of the rich Ifugao heritage. Aside from documenting the species, the information gathered in this study can serve as references for the younger generation of indigenous craftsmen in relation to the properties of the wood species that they use or that they should use in building their traditional houses. We hope that through this study, we can somehow make ways to make the indigenous structure of the indigenous architecture of the traditional house stay for the future generations to witness. These are the references that we use for this study. And we would like to acknowledge the following: the World Wood Day Foundation for funding this research, the International Wood Culture Society, Mr. Raimundo Dong-e, Mr. Patrick Pulpog, the local government and people of Yangan Ifugao, and the Forest Products Research and Development Institute, Department of Science and Technology. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Professor Mendoza, for the presentation. For sure, the younger generations do not have the knowledge already of the indigenous tree species that were used in the past decades. So these findings of your study can definitely contribute to enhancing their knowledge of what tree species were indigenous and were native in the areas used for traditional houses in the past. Probably because of their usage, some of these species are no longer available in the area, and thus the younger generations no longer are aware of such a species. So these findings would really great contribution to their knowledge as to what indigenous species of trees are or were found in the area for in the past that were used to build their traditional houses. Okay, so to continue our discussion on traditional houses of Ifugao, we have for the second topic, our next presenter is Professor Consuelo D.I. Habito. She is the program chair of the Diploma Master of Environment and Natural Resources Management of the University of the Philippines Open University. Professor Habito finished her PhD in engineering from the University of Melbourne, Australia in 2003. So for today's session, Professor Habito will present their research on constructing the indigenous traditional houses in Ifugao, Philippines. So again, dear attendees, the video presentation of Dr. Habito will be played in few seconds.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. For this afternoon, I'm going to talk about the construction of the indigenous traditional houses in Ifugao, Philippines. For the outline of my talk, I'm going to describe the study area, the objectives, the methodology, the results, and the summary. The Ifugao Rice Terraces is located in the Philippines. In this map, you see that the Philippines is an archipelago in Southeast Asia. It consists of about 7,100 islands, with the island of Luzon being one of the big islands. Specifically in Luzon, the province of Ifugao is located in the central mountain range named Cordillera. What is interesting about the Ifugao Rice Terraces is that it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and also a globally important agricultural heritage systems of the Food Agriculture Organization. As you can see in this built rice terraces landscape, the traditional house is an integral part of it. The objectives of the study are the following. The first, to describe the construction of the Ifugao traditional house, and second, to identify some challenges and drivers in the sustainability of the traditional house. For our methodology, the first source of data was from a review of all available literature on traditional house construction and information about the kinds of wood used. The second source of information were the homeowners and the home builders. And the third source of information was the field study conducted by the wood specialists, plant taxonomists, and ecologists in the study area. As mentioned in the first presentation by Dr. Mendoza, for the first source of data on Ifugao house construction, we interviewed the traditional house builders. The house builders were important sources of information, and they are based in Ifugao. Mr. Patrick Pulpog is a house builder based in Kiangan and owns several detached or collapsed traditional house components. He also builds traditional houses. Mr. Raimundo Dong-e, on the other hand, is a native house builder as well and also a wood carver. He is very familiar with all the important tree species used for house construction, and for this research, he provided a list of about 104 species of indigenous trees and their uses, which now form part of the indigenous knowledge systems and practices in Ifugao. For the second source of data on Ifugao house construction, we looked at the various published literature. Pertinent among these references is Father Francis Lambrecht, a Belgian Catholic missionary priest and anthropologist who was assigned in Ifugao. He published more than 70 original papers on Ifugao, which include its language, sagas, songs, religion and rituals, worldview, technology and art, and social-political systems and institutions. Many of his field notes and manuscripts have remained to be published after his demise. One of his publications included a 24-page highly detailed description of Ifugao villages and houses in the Kiangan, Banawe, and Mayuyao towns of Ifugao and Dukligan districts of the Mountain Province. The large granary houses of Kiangan were compared with the smaller houses of the districts with lower rice yields. A full description of the materials used in and techniques of construction of the houses were also given. Lambrecht describes, and I quote, "Where there are many rice fields, there are also many houses, either a few big villages having more than 40 houses or a lot of small villages having each 1 to 10 or more houses. As a Catholic priest, having dedicated his life to the Christianization of the Ifugaos, Lambrecht was the first outsider to have written detailed accounts of the Ifugao native house. Thus, the location of the house, granary, or village rests on where the rice fields are located. The farmers and their families cannot be found far from their rice fields. Lambrecht describes, and I quote, "The house of the Ifugao are truly remarkable. To the civilized world, they may appear as miserable huts, narrow, dark, and utterly uncomfortable. One must, however, consider all the circumstances which surround the life of the Ifugao. The houses are unsanitary. The smoke remains inside, preventing the circulation of pure air. But the Ifugao lives outdoors and goes indoors chiefly to sleep. If illness keeps him inside, he will not look upon his house as unsanitary, but will offer sacrifices to the spirit who are enduring his health. His house is small, but he lives in the open." In the Ifugao myths, Lambrecht narrates that a higher deity who intends to shortcut the trip to Earth can do so by diving down into the top of an Ifugao pyramidal roof. This is the only time that the native house's pyramidal roof is mentioned as part of the Ifugao myth. Now, what are the parts of the native house? So the main parts of the Ifugao traditional house have been described to include the foundation, the house cage, the roof, and the accessories. Lambrecht describes the parts of the house and the process in which the house is built with the absence of nails. Instead of nails, a mortise tenon joint connects the wood beams or posts together. Now let's look at the parts of the native house. The foundation of the house consists of 4 sturdy tukod or posts. The cross-section measures about 25 by 25 centimeter, whose lower end rests on flat stones buried in the ground. So about half a meter of these posts are buried in the ground, okay? And the height would be about 1.5 to 2 meters. The posts, 2 front and 2 back upper ends, as you see here in this photograph, are shaped to form a tenon that will fit into a squared mortise of the other part we call as the cooling or the transverse girders. The upper part of the tukod is cut or sharpened that is fashioned into a tenon. This is then followed by the wooden anti-rat discs or the halipan that have to be inserted to the posts before the transverse girders are joined to the posts. The halipan is a round flat piece of wood or a big cylindrical block fitted into the tukod a few centimeters before the cooling to prevent rats from entering the house. So that is the function of the halipan. The posts, 2 front and 2 back upper ends are shaped to form a tenon that will fit into a squared mortise of the transverse girders or what we call as the cooling. So here you see the 2 posts. Here you have the cooling. And then in the next slide, okay, so you see here that the tenon, so here you see the squares, the squared mortise of the transverse girders or cooling. Now you will see also that the cooling are largely cylindrical in shape and they protrude about 30 centimeters longer than the tukod. The length is about 2 to 3.5 meters. The next section of the house is the house cage. So in here, we start with the 2 side floor beams we call as the mundilig. So these are the mundilig, which are placed on the 2 transverse girders. So in this photograph, this is the mundilig, and then the other one is over on the other side. So these 2 mundilig are located on the opposite ends, okay, of the cooling, okay, and then a square hole is seen here, and as shown here in the photograph, wherein the bagad will be positioned. After the mundilig, we have the gawaan. So here we have a central beam we call the gawaan, which is placed on the middle section of the transverse girders or the cooling. So here we have the gawaan. Two smaller beams we call as the hagpo are mortised onto and connect the two mundilig and are supported in the middle by the gawaan. So where is this hagpo? This is the hagpo. This part here and this other part here. They are positioned in the front and the back edges of the house. So in this particular house, this is the hagpo. This one here and the other one positioned at the back. Another set of wall headers or upper wall beams, or what we call as the huklub, this one, are positioned on top of the upper end of the wall boards or the gaob. So this is the interior of a house, of a traditional house, showing to you where the huklub is. The huklub is this part here. That's the huklub. Okay, and on the exterior, you will see here the huklub, this section here of the house, forming the upper section of the wall. Okay. And here we have the gaob. Above the square plan of the mundilig, gawaan, and hagpo rise the wall boards, or what we call the gaob. This is the gaob. Okay, and you see here that the bottom section of the wall boards are fitted onto the grooves of the mundilig and also on the huklub. And you will notice here that the wall boards or the gaob are slightly inclined to the exterior. Next, we have the dotal or the floorboards. So the dotal or the floorboards are only half as long as the hagpo. Okay, so you will notice here that these are the, so this is a photo taken from the bottom part of the house. You will see here that these are the floorboards, this is the mundilig, and this is the gawaan. And here you will notice that the floorboards, okay, the gawaan, which is in the middle, okay, cuts the floorboards into half. So you only have this part here, and this other part here would form the floorboards. Okay, so the floorboards would rest on the side floor beams, the mundilig, and the central floor beam or the gawaan. So in this interior photograph of a traditional house, you see here the gawaan, and here you see the dotal or the floorboards. Next, we go to the pamadingan. So the pamadingan are these sections of the house cage, okay, which are fitted into the grooves of the front and rear floor joists or the hagpo, okay, and penetrates the front and rear purlin or lintel beams or dawanan. So in this particular photograph, you will see here, okay, the pamadingan. So these are the pamadingan. So in this particular pamadingan, you see a carving of a lizard decorating the pamadingan. Next, we have the panto. The panto is just simply the space between the pamadingan. So in this photograph, you see here the panto or the space. And this space is covered by a door shutter we call as the onob. So the door shutter is hanged and slid by strong rattan vines as shown in this photograph and locked from the inside by a bar or a daki. Next, we have the roof structure. So the most important part of the roof structure would be the bagad or the roof post. And as you will see here, the bagad, okay, as shown here, the ends are also carved so that it will fit the mundilig and also the cooling. So it locks itself within the mortise and tenon of the mundilig and also the cooling. Okay, so the 4 bagged posts are passed through the 2 mundilig and the 2 cooling, okay, and come out at the lower surface of the 2 cooling. Okay, thus they serve to fasten the mundilig to the cooling and at the same time are kept erect. Okay, so for the roof structure, okay, so this is for the roof structure of the house, the native house. So here is a photograph of the interior of a traditional house showing to you the roof post. Then this is followed by the 4 pieces of lintel beams or dawanan. Okay, so after the bagad, these are the bagad, you have the lintel posts or dawanan, which are mortised together and are attached to the upper end of the roof posts. So in this diagram, these are the roof posts. I'm sorry, the lintel beam. Okay, and these are the roof posts at the end. Okay. Next, we have a central attic beam or pumpitolan, which is found fitted in the middle of 2 opposite sides of the lintel beams or dawanan. So this is the central attic beam. So if rice is stored in the native house, okay, there will be a shelf or a flooring on top of this pumpitolan. Okay. However, most owners in Kiangan will have a granary or an alang, meaning a separate house or a separate granary. Okay, so they will not put any flooring on top of the pumpitolan. Next, we have the taknang or the king post or the upright timber. So the 2 king posts are jointed to the middle of the central attic beam. So they are jointed here, okay? And they actually provide support for the next structure we call as the ambubulan or the apex frame. So in here, you will see that the pumpitolan, instead of consisting of 2 pieces of wood, you only have 1. Okay? Now, on the apex frame are the bughol or the rafters. So the square piece of wood which we call as the ambubulan provides support for the 8 long rafters you will see here in the diagram. So first we have the 8 long rafters, okay, that form the apex of the roof. Okay, and then you have the other short ones here, which are actually only attached up to the level of the ambubulan, okay, in between the first 8 rafters. So in total, there will be 16. Okay. However, in the houses in Kiangan, there are only 12 bughol or rafters, and the pitch of the roof is not as steep. So you can actually see the house cage. Okay. So in here, you can see the interior of the bughol or the rafters inside. Okay. Okay. Now to these rafters are attached the ibat or the runo warps. So this you will see in the picture the runo warps, which form the support for the thatch roof covering. So above this ibat or runo warps are bundles of long grass or what we call as gulun, which are placed and tied to the ibat by running a runo stick above a sheaf of grass bundles. To secure the grass bundles, the runo is then tied to the ibat. Okay, so this is the ibat. And you have another piece of runo that will be secured to keep all the grass intact or inside. Okay. Okay. Now, what are the other accessories? So, of course, together with the floorboards, you will see also a fireplace. Okay, so the fireplace boards are called the punda pulan. Okay, and you will notice in this diagram and also in this photograph that the position of the fireboards are perpendicular or in 45 degrees opposite that of the floorboards. Okay, so in one corner of the house, you see this is the fireplace, or in this diagram, this is the fireplace. Okay, and if you will get one of these pundapulan, this one, you will notice that they have a projecting part on each end which fits into the slots cut into the hagpo. Okay, and we also have another piece which is called the hagait. Okay, so this piece here is the hagait. Okay, a very thick piece of wood. Okay, and rests on the right-handed mundilig and also the gawaan. So it rests on the mundilig here on the right side and also the gawaan on the left side. Now, the fireplace boards, as I mentioned earlier, are at right angles to the other floorboards. Okay, and on top of the fireplace, you will also see two shelves. Okay, so the sideboards or the shelves are called huguhug. Okay, the first level is allocated for the firewood, and the second level we call the batung is for rice. In addition, you will see also a horizontal storage shelf we call as the pati that runs from the wall header, which is the huklub, to the rafters. So this is the rafters and this is the huklub. Okay, and this storage shelf can either be made of wood. So here you see that it is made of wood. Okay, and in the next slide, it can also be made of runo sticks. Now, looking at this Ifugao traditional houses, we noticed or we observed some sustainability challenges, and one of them has something to do with its costly maintenance. Okay, one has something to do with the availability of the appropriate wood species. Okay, second, the grass roof is often replaced with galvanized iron sheets. Why? Because the grass roof will only last about 6 years. Okay, so instead of replacing the grass leaves or the grass roof every 6 years, some of the owners opted to have them replaced using galvanized iron sheets. Okay, some wooden parts, particularly the tukod, are also replaced by concrete so that it will not be eaten by termites. Okay, and then some also has used nails in securing the pieces of wood together. Some of the houses we saw, some of them have already been eaten by termites. Okay, and houses are also bought and brought out of the Ifugao rice terraces. Despite these sustainability challenges, there are also what we call as drivers of sustainability. And I would like to recognize the traditional house builders as keepers of indigenous knowledge on house construction. So here they are very knowledgeable about wood species suitable for construction, with the forests and woodlots still harboring the wood species. And then you have the indigenous people's education on traditional houses and the tree nurseries for culturally important trees. These are our references. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ma'am Habito. So there, Ifugao traditional houses, the wooden ones, have this very intricate or very specific architecture. I hope it will be preserved through time. Now, may I remind everyone that your questions will be attended after the third presentation. So for the third topic for this session, it will be presented to us by Ms. Eulalie Dulnuan and Dr. Marisa Bulong. The first half of the presentation will be delivered by Ms. Eulalie Dulnuan, the Director of the Ifugao Rice Terraces GIAHS Research and Development Center, Ifugao State University, Lamot, Ifugao, Philippines, and the concurrent director of the International Satuyama Meister training program of IFSU and Kanazawa University. Ms. Dolnuan finished her Master of Science in Leisure, Tourism, and Environment in 2007 from the Vahinagan International Fellowship Program. The second half of the presentation will be delivered by Dr. Bulong, the Director of the Department of Human Resources and Development of the Ifugao State University of, in Lamut, Ifugao. So Dr. Bulong is a faculty of the College of Agriculture and finished her Doctor of Philosophy in Crop Science at the Nueva Vizcaya State University Graduate School in 2013. So together, they will present the conservation planning for the wooden traditional houses of Kiangan, Ifugao. Welcome, Ma'am Dulnuan.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to the panel on Ifugao traditional houses. I am Yulali Dulnuan from the Ifugao State University. Together with my research partner, Dr. Marisa Bulong, we shall present the conservation planning for wooden traditional houses of Kiangan, Ifugao. The presentation is divided into two parts. First one is the background on the research project to explain the need for the conservation planning activity. And then the second part is the conservation planning activity itself, which will be presented by Dr. Marisa Bulong. So in 2019, a research project was conducted on the documentation of the built heritage of Kiangan, Ifugao, Philippines. This was a project funded by the National Commission on the Culture and the Arts. The study area is in Kiangan, Ifugao, Philippines, which is home of indigenous peoples, the Tualis. It is a UNESCO designated World Heritage Site and also an area designated by the Food and Agriculture Organization as a globally important agricultural heritage systems. A similar project was already conducted in the municipality of Mayuyao, Ifugao, another heritage town, as well as in the municipality of Honduan. The research project in Honduan was conducted by Ms. Gretchen Bayuca, and the one done in Mayuyao was done by Mr. Jeremy Kawongna. So the documentation was done to produce a complete inventory of the Ifugao wooden houses in Kiangan, as well as to identify the locations of all these houses throughout the barangays of Kiangan. We used the survey descriptive approach. We used total enumeration. It is necessary because it's an inventory. And we utilized survey questionnaires to gather data. And we conducted focus group discussions for verification and to address data gaps. We have the results, which show that there are 207 traditional houses in 13 out of 14 barangays of Kiangan, Ifugao. One barangay was not able to have the study or survey conducted there. There were 63% of these 207 houses are alang or granary, or which are used for grain storage, especially rice. 37% are used as house dwellings. These are called bale. In 1929, Father Lambret has counted 321 native houses in just 3 villages or barangays of Kiangan, Ifugao. So we asked, how did the house owners acquire these native houses? 90% said that it is by inheritance. They got it from their parents. 5% said they have built it themselves or by another house builder. 3% said they have bought it from someone else, and 2% are not sure how their family acquired their native house. As for the use of these facilities, 44% are used as storage, especially for agricultural crops. 30% are used as residential. 25% are not being used at all, and 1% is used as a homestay. As for the age of these traditional houses, most of them are more than 90 years old. In fact, 99 are 90 years old and 59 are more than 100 years old. These are estimates of the house owners. For the result of the objective 2, which is to identify the location, we were able to geotag all these houses and put it in Google Maps, and copies of these maps were framed and given to the different barangays of Kiangan. The recommendations of this research project is for the conduct of a conservation planning. We must have a plan as basis for policy formulation for the conservation of these traditional houses. We also saw the need for the preservation of rituals and practices that are connected with the construction and maintenance of the native houses. This could be done through documentation as well as learning these rituals and practices through the School of Living Tradition. There was also the need for vernacular architecture to be included in the indigenous people's education so that all learners would know more about the Ifugao native houses. So that is the background of the conservation planning workshop. At this point, my research partner, Dr. Marisa Pulong, shall present the conservation planning workshop itself. Thank you.
Good morning to all the organizers and participants to the third International Conference on Cordillera Studies. I will be presenting part 2 of the research project on conservation planning for the wooden traditional houses of Kiangan Ifugao. The first part was presented by Ms. Eulalie D. Dulnuan earlier. As an offshoot of our research project, a conservation planning workshop was conducted in Kiangan, Ifugao. And the participants to the conservation planning workshop were the following: all barangay chairpersons, one barangay councilman per barangay, municipal council or sangguniang bayan, Save the Ifugao Terraces Movement, a non-government organization, National Museum, youth representatives, and the IFSU GIAS team. During the conservation planning workshop, the participants came up with their shared vision of what they perceive to be the desired state of the traditional houses. The vision is consolidated into to restore the Kiangan traditional houses for its adaptive and multifunctional usage. A SWOT analysis was also facilitated during the conservation planning workshop. The participants came up with the following strengths. Native houses still exist in Kiangan. In fact, there are 207 traditional houses. And some areas where these native houses exist are accessible from the road. The native house is a symbol of Kiangan. It is an Ifugao identity. And the native houses are used for cultural and tourism activities and educational purposes. The native houses are livelihood source for additional income. Here were the weaknesses identified by the participants. First is abandonment, and there are many reasons why the native houses were abandoned. First is due to old age. As presented earlier, the native houses are 90 to 100 years old. They are already old. Another reason for abandonment is technological advances. Then the native houses were abandoned due to outmigration. Most of the native houses owners and their families migrated to other places out of their barangays, their municipality, and the province to look for greener pasture. Another reason for abandonment is lack of interest and change of crop. It is not only palay that is being produced in the areas where the native houses are, but vegetables and other crops are also being produced. Another weakness is that the native houses are not maintained. Third, lack of funds for restoration. And the last weakness is lack of local mechanism for restoration. That's why there is a need for ordinances to be crafted and more funds to support the restoration of these native houses. On opportunities, the following were identified. Heritage law for preservation of cultural properties, cultural and educational activities, pull factor for tourism, funding, livelihood and income generating purposes, and homestay. So there are a lot of opportunities for the native houses to be restored. On threats, we have climate change, lack of wood and materials because these are the ones being used to restore and even to construct these native houses. Another threat is lagban, termite infestation. Some portions of the native houses like the post, even the walls and the floor are infested with termites. And the occurrence of man-made and natural hazards is also another threat. Then the last one is lack or occasional tourist arrival. So these were the results of the SWOT analysis done by the participants. The participants to the conservation planning workshop had also other outputs. On policy advocacy component, there is a need to consult with native house owners and stakeholders for the restoration, maintenance, and repair of the wood structures. Ordinances on cultural property, protection and preservation by the local government units at the municipal and barangay levels need to be crafted. Other outputs on information, education, and communication component. So we have information, education, and communication, IEC campaigns on native houses conservation are also needed. Then students and even the teachers to be aware of the importance of conserving these native houses. Still on the IEC component, Native House Festival should be initiated. And there should be more social media promotion, and these native houses can be used as museums and even center for cultural activities. Another output from the conservation planning workshop is on collaboration and partnership. It is essential to have regular community tree planting activities, a source of indigenous trees for native house construction and repair. So this may be done in collaboration with the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, the Provincial Local Government Unit of Ifugao through its Provincial Agriculture Office, and even the special project of the Ifugao State University. And a nursery of indigenous tree species is being established at a local elementary school for educational purposes and sources of planting materials. So this is an extension activity of the Ifugao State University and the Save the Ifugao Terraces movement, an NGO, where an indigenous tree species nursery is being established, being implemented in Kiangan Central School in Kiangan, Ifugao. And the purpose of this is as a show window for the school children, the students, the teachers, and even the local residents to learn more about these indigenous tree species. So this is for educational purposes. And of course, later on, this would be a good source of planting materials. So these are on collaboration and partnership. Finally, we thank the National Commission for Culture and the Arts, NCCA, for the financial support given for the conduct of the research project, documentation of the built heritage of the municipality of Kiangan. We also thank the University of the Philippines, Open University, and the University of the Philippines, Los Baños, for the technical support. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Bulong. Yes, so for the conservation of this traditional Ifugao wooden houses, collaboration between our academe, the researchers, the LGUs, the provincial government, the DNR, and also promotion of this traditional structures, houses, is essential. And also the planting of trees that are used for this traditional wooden houses of Ifugao is also a key to the sustainability of these structures. So thank you very much for our presenters today. There are already questions posted in our chat box. Okay, so I may start siguro with the question posted by Sir Roy Hapasi. For our first presenter. Is the Benguet pine also used in building this Ifugao bale houses? If not, why? Since these pine trees are abundant in the area. Dr. Mendoza?
Yes, thank you, Ma'am Lisel, and thank you, Sir Roy, for that question. Actually, we identified Benguet pine, Pinus cassia, or halong. We were able to observe houses with halong or Benguet pine components po.
Okay, so halong is Benguet pine.
The local name, ma'am.
Okay po. Okay, there. There's another question from Miss Erica Ray Saturay. Ma'am, were you able to get an inventory of native species of trees in Ifugao, especially the species of Nara? Still for Dr. Mendoza?
Yes, but the team did not include that part of the inventory po. Going to the forest and actually measuring and counting the Nara trees, we did not do that po.
Okay. Another question, ma'am. So for this species of trees that were identified in your study, for them to be suitable for construction materials, are there specific ages to harvest this tree? So you cannot harvest them at, if tree planting is going to be conducted nowadays, so when are these trees be available for construction materials? Will that be a sustainable plan to plant trees now?
Ideally, ma'am, we should harvest the wood when they are already mature. But some of the endemic species that we discussed now are slow growing. So we still can harvest it, but we have to treat it. So they will be more durable when we use it for construction po. So we can harvest it early, but we have to do some measures so they will be more durable when we use it for construction of the houses.
Considering the age factor, it seems like there is also this issue on sustainability for the use of these materials for construction use. Tama
Yes,
po ba?
ma'am. And then related to the other question that I saw here in the chat, that's why it is really important to identify the original species that we use for the construction, because there are measures that we can substitute it, especially when the species are not available already. So we can substitute it by looking for available species that are quite similar, that the properties are quite similar with the ones that they originally used in the past.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Ma'am, another question. So is there an observed correlation between the abundance of the identified wood species and the use of this species in building houses through time? So may correlation po ba?
Ma'am, the report that we included in the paper, we got it from the digital digital flora, the status of the species there. So, but personally, we did not do the inventory po of the species in the Ifugao po. So the reported conservation status was from the digital flora po
So
database.
this may refer to the present conservation status of the species that were identified. So
Yes, ma'am.
we haven't tracked, kumbaga, the relation or the abundance of this in relation to their use from the past decades. Like in the past ba, mas abundant si Shorea, and then it was used for construction material, kaya nag-decline siya, something like that.
But when we did the grouping of the species, we saw that for the houses that we sampled, the premium species are more available in the earlier decades than the recent decades, because we saw exotics now being used in building the traditional houses po.
Yeah, so which means if age factor is is needed or is significant, then it's really possible that the matured ones were harvested in the past and it's not yet, I mean, the population declined from then on, which made it become vulnerable these days.
That can be implied po, from the results that we gathered, ma'am.
Oo. Okay. Thank you, Ma'am Mendoza. May we go to our second presenter? For the traditional houses, Miss Twinkle Ferrarin says here, I understand one concern is also that the type of wood is not allowed to be used already for environmental reasons also. Are there alternative materials being looked into at the moment? Perhaps the eco-fiber materials or something like that? Because it would be nice to still preserve some of the technical aspects of the design and details, but how to replicate now without hurting the environment also? So this goes to our second presenter.
For the technical part, I think Dr. Mendoza should answer that one on the alternative materials that can be used. But I would say that wood is still the best. So we really just need to plant more trees so that we can use these tree species when they are mature enough and use them for tree building. In fact, in some of the conferences that we have attended as a group, talagang wood pa rin is the best. And in fact, they are now promoting to use wood even for what they call these multi-level buildings. So kung ilang floors pa yon, pero wood pa rin talaga yung gusto nila. So I think the trend is towards you still using wood as the preferred wood species for traditional building. Now for what was the other question? The presence of Ma'am Dr. Mendoza, can you answer that one? The technical part?
Yes, ma'am. So I support po yung answer ni Dr. Habito about still using wood for the houses kasi yun po that is the main goal po of preservation. You bring back the structure of what was it hundreds of years ago. And about that, yes po, we can do that. Pero the value, I think the value will be not the same po if we are going to use wood. And that's why I mentioned a while ago that we can look for wood species substitutes with similar, with comparable properties po. For example, for posts, they use amugawon. So right now, what are the species that are available to be used for posts? Those with high strength properties. Or for house cages, what are these species that are readily available that can be used for house cages? Those that do not require high strength grouping. So we can look for substitute po, but still we prefer to use wood species po than the composites.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Dr. Habito, there's another question. Are the knowledge of constructing the Ifugao houses being transferred to the next generation, specifically to the younger generation, so these traditions can be passed on continuously? If yes, is there a formal education being implemented or included in the curriculum?
Okay. I think this was mentioned in the third presentation by Professors Dulnuan and Bulong about the presence of the indigenous people's education. So they are already using this traditional knowledge for house construction for teaching. In fact, Professor Dulnuan was mentioned that there's a non-formal course in IFSU, in the Hongduan campus, where they teach native house construction. So they are doing it.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, are Ifugaos divided into tribes or subgroups?
Yeah, maybe I should.
Professor Lali?
Yeah.
Because if Ifugaos are divided into tribes or subgroups, Um, are there distinctions
Yeah.
of house designs according to tribes or
Ah.
subgroups?
Oh
Yeah.
yes.
Oh,
Uh,
muta.
like for example, the Mayuyaw house has a very steep roof compared to the houses in Kiangan and also in Hungduan. So those are the two major differences in the houses. But again, of course, there would be some differences. Even when we were looking at the houses, some of the parts are in fact a bit different. Like some would not have the halipan or there would be some modifications already in the houses. But one distinct difference is that the Mayuyaw houses are very steep roofed. Then you cannot actually see anymore the house cage as compared to the Kiangan houses, wherein you can still see the house cage.
Thank you, ma'am. There's another coming from Ma'am Annalyn Salvador. Thank you for the fascinating presentation. Would your research also extend to the kind of wood used in the ball or anthropomorphic carvings?
The bulol.
Date?
I think she's referring to the bulol.
So, yeah.
We actually asked that from the wood carvers because we also encountered wood carvers in our study, and they said that most of the bulol are made up of nara or udyo. So, but based on the comment of Professor Salvador, I think she's offering to have some of the bulols analyzed to see if they are really all made up of nara or udyo. But then I think Dr. Mendoza would have some certain requirements on how she would do the ID, and I don't know if Dr. Salvador would consent to that kasi kailangan i-chip away yung cross-section ng konti, no? So kung yung mga bulol ay hindi pwedeng galawin, parang medyo mahirap i-identify yung kahoy. So that would be a problem.
Yung likod ng bulol.
But mostly it's nara. It's made up of nara.
Another question from Prof. Salvador. Can we date wooden houses with existing samples?
Yeah.
With
How do
bulol.
Ifugao perceive the Ifugao, what's this, fail?
The house.
Bale.
Fale.
Ma'am, are you referring to the bulol?
Hello, ma'am. Can I
house.
interrupt?
Yes,
Yes po, yes po.
This is Professor Salvador.
Hello po.
Yeah. So my question's really so I'm concerned about the use of Nara for both the bulol, that's the anthropomorphic carvings, and the fale or bale, which is the Ifugao traditional house. So have you encountered Nara in the building of the Ifugao house?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
So
Yes.
that's also related to the kind of wood that was used in the bulol, right?
Yes.
Yes. So can you actually test or examine what kind of wood or the age of the wood by taking samples underneath the bulol, not shaping off the patina? And how deep is that? Wood samples. I know a colleague of mine studying wood coffins, so I'm just curious if that's being done.
So, ma'am, you for the identification of the age, so we should do carbon dating to
Okay.
do that. And unfortunately po, we do not have equipment here that will help to do that carbon dating po. Usually we samples po to another country to do the carbon dating. Age of the
So,
yes po, ma'am.
Dr. Rosalie, I'm interested also if you've done work on the Hagabi wood samples.
Hagabi, that's the bench.
the bench.
Hi, Ma'am Lali.
The bench?
Yeah. The one, what do you call that?
A stage bench.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, because our team is also doing research on that aspect. I hope we can collaborate with you as
Yeah,
well.
sure, ma'am. We can collaborate. We are open to collaborations po. So maybe we can converse through emails po after this
Okay.
about that possible collaboration. But ma'am, for that age identification po ha, so that is a bit complicated. We cannot do it just by looking at the cross section, and we really need to subject it to high tech test, carbon
Okay.
dating po.
Ma'am, last question. Sorry, makulit. Have you encountered different Nara species in your research on that tree, that kind of tree? Are there wild Nara or a regular common Nara? Kasi earlier in the first presentation, you mentioned that there's a wood na lalaki, wood na babae. So I wonder if that also applies to your investigation of the Nara, if there are different varieties, and where is the source of the trees that were used? Are they in the vicinity of Kiangan area, or they have to get it from outside villages? Like in our research, we found out that it was Nayon in Lamut where most of these hard trees are found. No, so in your ecological ecosystem research, have you encountered such?
For the first question, ma'am, you refer to dalakan lalaki or dalakan babae, but for Nara, it is just Udyo. So the builders referred to it as Udyo. So they only classified one Nara or one Udyo po. And then for the source, ma'am, that that I cannot really answer po kasi we just identified po yung mga parts of the houses, the standing and the dismantled houses, but I do not have idea if the original builders sourced it from the nearby towns or within the vicinity po. But for the recently built houses po, I think they source it po within the vicinity. Do you have any additional, Ma'am Connie?
Yes.
Yes po.
The study actually did not involve us doing a forest, transect analysis of biodiversity. However, what we did was what we call the tree walk. We just walked through yung mga footpaths leading to the other houses. And that was the reason why we said that the trees are still available, because when we were with we considered the wood builder as part of our research team. Siya talaga yung nag-identify, yan, ang tawag dyan ay ganito, ginagamit yan para sa ganitong part ng bahay. So he's very familiar with what tree species to use and which part of the house was it used. So when we did our tree walk, we said that, andito pa pala yung mga trees. Wala pang. The only problem is, like in one instance, wherein one town, like Kiangan, called the Kawahi, Cryptocarya to, no? Ang tawag nila ay Kawahi. But when we move to Hongduan, it is called Gahatan. So yung mga common names, nag-iiba-iba, pero they are referring to the same species. So yun yung medyo tricky na part. But up to now, we're still doing our research kasi we get bits and pieces of information. Like recently, Prof. Dulnuan mentioned, Connie, we finally found kawahi, and it is used for smoking out the bees from their honey collection. Sabi ko, can you please send pictures of the leaves and the stem so we can have Professor Pat to identify it. So yun, finally nag-converge yung kawahi, yung gahatan, yung cryptocarya pala yun, etc. So ganun yung nangyayari dun sa research namin.
Yeah. Thank you, Ma'am Annalie. Yeah, that's one of the problems in taxonomic identification. Regarding the Nara, so since there's only one local name mentioned by the builders, so were you able to identify which species of Nara, ma'am, based on the structure of the wood? So there are different species of Nara, quote and unquote, like the one bearing thorny fruit and the one bearing a smooth fruit.
Yes, ma'am. So actually, our taxonomist here, Professor Pat Malabrigo. But for the wood, ma'am, here at UPLB, we only identified it as Nara because they are really similar. So, it is very difficult to differentiate for the variety, Forma indicus and Forma echinatus of the Nara species. So we just call it Nara po, official common name, without the forma.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, regarding the third presentation po, when was this study conducted, the conservation planning, and what are the status of the recommendations? If the IFSU, local community, and other stakeholders already working on this? Regarding the conservation planning that were presented, you conducted workshops with different stakeholders. So what's the status of the recommendations, and are this already working? Are
Yeah.
the stakeholders already working on it?
Yeah, thank you for the question. We conducted the study in 2018. Yeah, we continued doing so with the other members of the team, the research team, with regards to wood identification in 2019. And then at the end of 2019, December, I think, or last quarters of that year, we were able to conduct the conservation planning workshop. As to the status of the recommendations, we were able to have this extension or outreach program, specifically the establishment of the native tree species nursery. We are putting that in the Kiangan's elementary school, so it would be part of the educational, or it would be a learning, shall we say, material for the school children. It's just that pandemic happened, so yeah, maybe when the school or classes face-to-face mode will resume, then we'll be able to have a more active participation of the school children or the learners. So then they will know more about the tree species and their use in the native house construction. Other recommendations then we were one of the primary, or shall we say, priority actions to be done was the conduct of the conservation planning workshop, and we did that. But now we have to go after the outputs of that workshop. So at the moment, actually, this was last week, a cultural mapping activity for the entire municipality of Kiangan is being done, or shall we say started, and we will make sure that the documentation of the native houses of the Belt Heritage of Kiangan will be included in that cultural mapping. We're working on the other recommendations, but yeah, with collaboration with Doc Connie and Doc Lali of UPLB and UPOU, we're sure to do more and more with regards to the native houses of Ifugao. So it's not limited to Kiangan. We've been trying to encourage Mayuyao, and now maybe we should put more, shall we say, encouragement for Hongduan to do more regarding the native houses.
Okay. Still regarding the conservation planning, ma'am. What is the extent? A question coming from Franco of MMSU Batak. What is the extent of participation or engagement of the community with this endeavor, and especially among the younger generations having been exposed to cultures outside their communities?
Mar. Yeah. With regards to the extent of participation, we made sure that, of course, government would play a very big role in the conservation of this, because we're pushing for ordinances, we're pushing for policy for the so everyone would help in the conservation Belt Heritage. So we made sure that all the barangay captains are there, even the one barangay that was not able to participate in the survey. We made sure that the ones who accompanied the enumerators would be there so that they would verify all the information that we presented to the community. There were youth representatives. There were also participants from other agencies like the National Museum as well as the NGO of Ifugao, the Save the Traces movement. We came up with with an action plan on what to do next. As to the extent of participation, like did people really do something about this? Then yeah, I think the answer is yes. One of the trainees from what we have this training program on conservation, the Ifugao Satayama Master Training Program. One of them agreed, or shall we say, volunteered to study the Belt Heritage of Hongduan. Yeah, so then I think that's a very big step forward because this this researcher was young, you know, like in her 20s, and I think that's one manifestation that yeah, the youth are kind of involved and are really participative in the conservation of the heritage.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. Last two questions, Bob, and we will be having a photo op. So please open your videos later, open your cameras later. So for the last two questions, one from Dean Javier of UP Baguio. Thank you for panel speakers. Thank you, panel speakers. Innocent questions here. How long does it usually take to complete construction? And second, I wonder how they ward off termites, or are there no termites?
I would like to answer first the second question regarding the termites. Certainly there are termites, and we have also seen some houses that have already been eaten away by termites. So isa yun, that's one problem no, on how to do the conservation or the preservation of these houses, especially for the parts of the wood that have been eaten away by termites. For the complete construction, the houses usually do not have, I don't have any specific idea on how long it will take, but I would think that since there are no nails, no, yung parang yung mortise and tenon na, so it, sabi nga nila kung may bagyo, madaling ilipat yung isang bahay sa ibang lugar, except nga yung roofing. Kasi yun yung medyo tedious kasi when you know, you attach the grass roof to the rafters, yun yung medyo matrabaho kasi talagang masinsin yun para to build it up. So I cannot answer question number 1, but I will get back to you, Ma'am Javier, and I will ask my my colleague from Hongduan on how long does it take to build a traditional house.
Okay, but I understand that if they want to relocate it, madali lang, no? Mabilis lang.
Yes.
Okay. Last question. So again, if you have other questions, further clarifications, probably you can ask directly from our speakers. So for our last question here, is there a place we can see all these types of woods, like a forest library, a tree forest library?
Yes, ma'am, we have.
Hello, good afternoon, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we have a forestry library here in a barangay in Lamut, Ifugao. So it's managed by the provincial local government unit of Ifugao, but we still have to see if really the types of trees grown there are all used for native house construction. So they are maintaining that forestry library in the PLG Ifugao.
Okay, so ma'am, there, so merong library, Ma'am Twinkle. So we can visit this library soon, and it's also good that maintained or managed by the provincial government. Kaya parang, so hindi lang academe ang nagme-maintain ng ganitong fasilidad. Okay, so again, thank you very much to our presenters. Thank you for sharing with us your knowledge, your studies on the traditional Ifugao wooden houses. Na despite the exposure of the new generations to modern culture or modern materials for construction, still the wooden houses of Ifugao, the traditional houses of Ifugao, are still up and protected.